I think it's important to understand what you think it is before you actually go into it.
Digital nomad since 2018, Chris was a remote 9 to 5er when his nomad journey began by accident. He turned into a nomad solopreneur with his newsletter RemoteBase, where he shares curated accommodation deals with other digital nomads.
The newsletter started by accident, and I realized, look, if I can't stay in these places, that's not fair. Like, somebody should stay in them.
As a top 50 remote enabler, Chris has logged on from 6 continents and most recently has been speaking at Nomad events about the future of nomad accommodation. In this episode, Chris, the nomad accommodation guy, discussed his journey from corporate job to nomadic entrepreneur and stressed the importance of managing expectations before embarking on this lifestyle, as the life will stay the same even if the location change.
To me, that was a real game changer. It helped me avoid a lot of burnout. It helps me feel a lot more stable and a lot more happy.
Chris also detailed his constant growth success with creating a nomad newsletter, using smart growth tactics, and focus.
I won't work with every product, but that's another really good growth tip, I think, for early stage growth.
If you want to start a remote journey or a newsletter business, you don't want to miss this episode.
Hiring was really about understanding that if I ever want to work on the business, somebody else has to work in the business.
Hey Chris, welcome to the Nomad Solopreneur Show.
Hello, Gabe. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here on the Nomad Solopreneur Show.
Happy to have you, and I see that you have a nice background there, joining us from beautiful Chiang Mai.
This is not a virtual background. This is a real life background. Unfortunately, it's very busy here right now, so there's no call rooms available. And so I get to be in the beautiful outside in the nature while I have this conversation with you.
I will argue that it's a better choice because at the end of the day, it's the Nomad Solopreneur Show and you're a nomad and you're on the road. And this is a real life example that we have to deal with while we have our disposal in that moment. Please tell me it's same good old Chiang Mai, busy as hell and barely finding a co-working space spot.
Yeah, it's definitely got busier, like maybe in the last week or so. It's really coming into the season now for digital nomads and international tourists and even domestic tourism here. But they have some festivals on this time of year, so it gets very busy in town. So yeah, safe to say we are busy.
Huge hotspot like Chiang Mai or Bali, they become busier and busier after the pandemic. But you're not new to this lifestyle. You are a digital nomad for more than 6 years. I'd love to know, what was that pivotal moment that made you change to this lifestyle?
At the time, I was working remotely at a company based in the UK. So this was a company that had a physical office, but they were just very flexible. And at the time, this was quite a progressive view for a company to have. It was like, yeah, you guys can work wherever you like. You want to come into the office? That's okay. You want to stay at home? That's also okay. And at the time, one of my colleagues, he was on the remote year program. So this was like before they really launched remote year. I think how long ago this was. Remote year hadn't really launched, but they did like a beta test. So they ran a program which was kind of stealth mode before they even really launched. And he was on this program. So one of my colleagues was doing this and I was sat in an office looking at him doing it. And I was like, okay, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And that was kind of it. That was when the seed was planted. And then at the time, my girlfriend had a job where she had to go into the office. So this was not practical. And so we decided to change that. So she left that job and she found a job that would let her work remotely. And then we started to go on small trips, like a weekend away, but we stay for longer than a weekend and we do some work either side. And then that slowly built up into going away for 1 week, going away for 2 weeks, going away for 3 weeks. And before we know it, now average, we spend 2 to 3 months away in each location. And that was it. That was all 6 years ago. And it feels like a different life.
Yeah, time flies, especially when you encounter this type of experience, like you're living in a different place for more than just a week vacation or something. If you spend a few months in one place, you don't realize when that time flies. And you probably do some plans to explore that region and you end up, oh, this is actually my lifestyle. It's not just some sort of vacation that I go to explore and so on. On that note, I would love to ask you, what are the challenges with this lifestyle?
I think it's important to understand what you think it is before you actually go into it, right? Like if you're doing it and you're like, oh, this is very different to how I expected it to be, probably you just had these really weird expectations that weren't accurate. The key things are going to be like all the work that you're doing now, you're still going to need to do that, right? Like people think maybe if they go away, they'll have to do less work or the work will be easier. It's going to be the same. It's the same work. It's the same work and it's going to take the same amount of effort and the same amount of time. It's just you're going to be in a different place. So that's probably key number one. Try to manage expectations before you go. And yeah, more likely the challenge will be like finding the balance between being distracted by the shiny things that distract you when you're in new, exciting places with work. I think for me, that was the difficult thing. Like you're in a place for 4 weeks or 6 weeks, and there's all of these things to do, all of the things that you might want to do if you're a tourist there for a weekend, but you're not there for the weekend. You're there for 6 weeks. So that makes you feel like you can do more. Definitely makes you feel like you can do it all. And you might even try to do it all. But if you do that, you might actually run out of energy and time for the stuff that's actually facilitating your being there, which is the work, the remote work. But yeah, I would say try to balance that and try to remember there is no rush. You don't have to do it all because you can come back or stay longer. And I think when you make that realization, that moment where that clicks, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, like I don't have to rush around and see everything and do everything. Because if I really like this place, I can come back and I can see it then. And for me, that was a real game changer. It helped me avoid a lot of burnout. It helps me feel a lot more stable and a lot more happy. Like I don't really have FOMO anymore because I'm never really missing out. I'm just missing out in the moment. And then I come back and I can see stuff again. And in fact, I always like to have something that I didn't do in a place. It makes me have a reason to go back if I really want to. There's never a feeling like, oh, I've done everything in there,
Yeah, I can resonate. It was one of the struggles at the beginning, and it took me like 2 years to arrive at that point to not have that fear of missing out. And it was about Bali because I arrived there and I realized that there are so many other islands and so many other amazing things to explore. And as a newbie, I tried to do everything and go every single place. And I just realized like, holy shit, I didn't focus anymore on my work and this is not good. This is not sustainable. And I slowly pivot into that mindset that you mentioned. And now, as you said, I just go back. I've been to Bali 3 or 4 times. I've been to Thailand countless times. And I just go in this loop in which I go to the same places. Of course, I explore new countries, new locations. A friend has this quote that we don't travel as nomads between places. We travel between communities. And it's kind of true because we continue to follow on that. And you mentioned work a few times. And I know that you're running for us nomads a very important newsletter, a RemoteBase, which as an experienced traveler, I still struggle with finding accommodations. And you facilitate that by finding those amazing deals. I don't know how you do it. And I would love to pick your brain on that. But you keep on pushing amazing deals into the newsletter. And before diving a bit into that, I would love to ask you, how did you came up with the idea? By simple necessity or was something else?
Well, thank you, first of all, because that's some very kind words. I'm glad that you like the newsletter and that you use it and you see the value. Yeah, the newsletter started by accident. It was, first of all, my list of places that I found that were really good. And I thought, okay, one day we'll visit all of these places. But the list, when you spend like 1 month or 2 months in a place, the list was growing faster than I could visit the places. And I realized, like, look, if I can't stay in these places, that's not fair. Like, somebody should stay in them. And so at the time, this is pre-pandemic, before like the explosion of remote work. So there was a few places online, like Slack communities or different forums where people would talk about remote work. And I was a member of these online communities. And so I just put the question out. I'm like, hey, I have this huge list. Like, I'm thinking about maybe sharing it somewhere, somehow, maybe with the email newsletter. Is that something that people would be interested in? And, a bunch of people raised their hands, said, yeah, I would like to have access to that kind of information. And so I just went ahead and did it. And at the time when it started, I was working full time. I didn't have this grand vision. I kind of knew like at some point it would need to be monetized just to kind of keep itself going. And I had some ideas on how to do that. Like anybody who's from the US might be familiar with Scott's Cheap Flights. They recently rebranded to Going. And that's like an email newsletter where they find flight deals. In the UK, we have something very similar called Jack's Flight Club. And this was a model that inspired me in some way. It was like, eventually, if it gets big enough, then we can monetize it this way. That should be enough to keep things going. And I just kept working at my day job. And when I launched the newsletter, I put the link out to those same online communities. And at the same day, like more than 100 people signed up. And I was like, wow, that's like 100 people. That's a lot. And now it's over 4,000 people. About a year and a half ago, I stopped working at my full-time job to work on this. So this is now my full-time job. It's not just my little project anymore. It's still my little baby. I still love it. I think many solopreneurs who listen to this will have some way to resonate with this feeling. But yeah, it's now my full-time focus. And so the mission now is to execute on the grand vision that I have now. I didn't really have this big vision when I started, but now over the years, more clear vision has emerged for what could be the potential for the newsletter and kind of assets around the newsletter. And yeah, I'm enjoying the journey as we go.
Yeah, I love that journey. And the fact that you didn't took the leap straight away, you just stay in your full-time job, build this by the side. And I think that's something that a lot of people are missing. The fact that they don't have to have the perfect plan to start something. You just have an idea, you validate it because that's really important. And after that, you try to see how it goes. And you mentioned that now you're over 4,000 subscribers. How fast that list growth and in what moment you start to monetize it? Because now being your full-time job and continue to have this lifestyle living anywhere, it's something that a lot of people dream of, but they might not know to build a business like this. And I would like to dive a bit deep into the business model, if you don't mind.
Yeah, for sure. So the growth was slow. It's probably the thing that, on paper, it looks really slow. Trying to think, like, the newsletter launched in 2019, it was 2023. So it's like 1,000 people a year. Not really that big. The growth is not like Instagram that say like, hey, we're going to launch this new app. It's called Threads. And they just like press a button and like overnight, it's like tens of millions of people just coming out of somewhere to sign up to this app. It's not like that. And that's okay. For me, it was very important to remain organic, which, like in the like solopreneur community, it's like some people really don't like paid acquisition. It's like, it's not real if it's paid. I don't think like that. I think paid acquisition is amazing if you can get the numbers, if you can get that equation to be perfect, then amazing. For me, it was never something that I pursued very early because I had a full-time job. And so I didn't need to scale this thing to be this big money-making machine very early. So I didn't do it. I just kind of kept it organic. And honestly, I think that helped me stay true. It helped me remain independent and be like, okay, I'm going to show you these deals because I think they're good deals, not because I think this is going to make me a load of money. And in this audience, all of the customers, they're like very digitally savvy. And they don't like to be sold to. They don't like to feel like maybe you're trying to manipulate them. So having this like true independent voice and trying to keep their trust, I think paid off in the long run. There isn't a lot of unsubscribe. Like our unsubscribe is way below 1%. I think it's like 0.6%, which is very good for industry standards. And yeah, like that was how things slowly progressed. There's things that you can do to try and obviously accelerate that growth. So partnering with other brands or doing like cross collaborations, or very soon I'll be introducing a referral program where like you refer people and you get prizes, but the prizes have to be good, right? They have to be something that the people want. Otherwise, it's not going to work. It won't be enough to incentivize them. But I think if you can give prizes that give value, then that's a reason for people to stick around. So I monetized it. There was another part of the question there around monetization. So the first time I monetized the newsletter was sometime just after I had 1,000 subscribers. And it was with an ad. So I ran a paid ad in the newsletter. It was kind of like a test, like, can I sell ad space in the newsletter? Turns out I could, but I think it was very underpriced, which is fine because it helps me learn the process of like, okay, when you sell some ad space, there's all of this stuff to consider, like the assets that the client gives you and like how you talk to them about how you display their ad. Like, for me, whenever I sell ads now in the newsletter, there's a whole conversation that happens with the client about the copy, because I will not let somebody just give me copy and just run the copy. Like, I always look at it, edit it like 95% of the time, just to try and make it more remote base. So like all of the tone and the voice of the copy is more like it's coming from me or coming from us as RemoteBase rather than just coming from the client. And I think this helps with the ad performance because it helps the content feel more native and less like an ad. And in the long run, that's beneficial. Some clients like it, some clients don't like it, but that's the way that it is. And my opinion is that's what works best. So that's the way that I do it.
Yeah, I love that approach. And I think it's indeed very important because otherwise, as you mentioned, your readers might feel that you're just selling something to them or promoting, doing it for money and so on. And at the end of the day, each newsletter or each content that you create should be helpful for them. Otherwise, we lose them. And apart from these approaches, what other tactics you use to grow the newsletter? And I wanted to mention as well the monetization part and the referral program. Any other future plans that you want to use to grow it?
I guess I won't stop doing this. I'll still continue to do it, but I would try to do lots of cross collaboration. So I'd find somebody that had the same target customer, but a non-competing product. Like a really good example is remote job boards, because not all remote workers are digital nomads, but all digital nomads are remote workers. Like they all work remotely. And a good portion of them are going to be using remote job boards to find jobs. And there's loads. There's so many remote job boards. And now there's even more because because of everything that's happened in the remote work space. So that was a really good way to access established audiences where the community has trust. Like if you're sharing jobs with somebody, like they have to trust you. They have to trust the brand and trust the voice. So a lot of those newsletters had like promotional slots or ad spaces, and we would just collaborate. Well, I give them a shout out in my newsletter and say, hey, if you're looking for a new job, here's where you can find one. And they would do the same thing where they say, look, you're working remotely. Maybe you want to do that from France, or maybe you want to do that from Bali. Like, check out this newsletter. They have good deals on accommodation for traveling remote workers. So like very slight language tweak, traveling remote worker instead of digital nomad. But essentially the target customer is the same. And there's ways that you can balance, like if there's an unbalanced audience size, you can balance that. So if somebody has an audience of 2,000 and my audience is 1,000, I just say to them, cool, well, I'll run you twice. You run me one time and I'll run you twice. And that makes them feel it makes them feel like they're not getting the raw end of a deal, but you still get that exposure to that huge audience. So yeah, I think that's a really important growth strategy in the early stages. And it can help you if you're like under 1,000 subscribers. That's a really good way to like level up. Yeah, and then outside of that, I think organic content. Like I talk a lot on LinkedIn. That's kind of how you and me interfaced the first time. And it's crazy, like just talking on LinkedIn, just saying stuff brings random connections into my life, which is crazy. And some of them then go on and lead to bigger things, and people become like an advocate for your brand without you really having to do anything. So yeah, just being on there, providing value. I don't share any of the newsletter content there because that has to remain like behind the subscribe wall. Like I want someone's email address. That's the end goal, right? So that all stays there, but I talk around digital nomadism, and I talk around nomad life, and I talk about being a nomad couple, and I talk about work-life balance, and I just talk about all of this random stuff. So being a voice in the space outside of the newsletter, I think is a big win and a really good growth strategy. And I'm honestly, like, I don't think I'm very good at that. I do it and I like it a lot. I really like doing it, but I'm not the best at it. So if you can steal tactics from somebody who is good at it, like if you steal tactics from Gabe, who's very good at that organic content side on LinkedIn, then, or maybe you're already somebody who's really good at Instagram, or like maybe you're exceptional with YouTube, like, okay, you can very quickly start to drive all of this traffic to your newsletter, and that'll be an amazing funnel and growth strategy. So just keep doing that. And then as you scale past like 2,000-3,000, that's when you start to look at things like referral programs and all of this other stuff. And as part of referrals, you could do like competitions and giveaways and stuff like that, which on other platforms, they're a bit of a no. I think there was this whole period of like 2 or 3 years where like all you would see on Instagram was like giveaway, like competition, all of this stuff, like this and follow this page. And eventually, I think the algorithm just didn't really like it. But the beautiful thing with an email newsletter is there's no algorithm to control it. So if you want to run that, then you can run it. And there might be some downside to it, but if there is, it's not going to be the algorithm. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. Like previous growth strategies and some new stuff. One thing that I would add actually to early stage growth is like organic content is great. And I do that on social media, but I don't run a blog. So a lot of people will be like, do it on your own blog, get SEO optimized and chase the SEO dream. I decided not to do that. It just wasn't exciting for me. And honestly, maybe it's because I didn't really understand it at the time, but it just didn't seem exciting to me. It felt more like I was going to get on a treadmill that I could never, ever get off. So instead of doing that, I tried to borrow other people's SEO efforts. So I would liaise with other bloggers who are already prominent in the space. And most of them already have like a page, which is best accommodation platforms or tips for finding accommodation as a digital nomad. And I would just be like, hey, you have this page. Like, I don't know if you see this product, but it's my product and I love it and I think you should use it. Check it out. If you like it, please consider adding us to this page, which you already have up. And they can just add a paragraph to that page and it takes them 10 minutes. But the benefit for RemoteBase is huge. You get plugged into a blog post, which if it's an existing blog post and it's already been ranking, then you kind of get plugged into that straight away. And you don't have to do like a guest feature or something where you then have to wait for the SEO gains. You just get plugged straight into that. So at the time when I started doing that, I didn't really have any idea about SEO. And over the years, I've learned more about it and I've spoken to other people about it. In fact, here in Chiang Mai right now, this week is Chiang Mai SEO conference. So the place is buzzing with people doing SEO. And yeah, I didn't really know that I was doing it, but I was like leveraging other people's SEO without even really realizing it. And that's a very good strategy too. If you can create that trade-off with someone. I don't think it would work if I was like, hey, I'm selling t-shirts and I want you to put me in your blog. They'd be like, oh, what's the benefit? But this is a product that is really relevant to people. And so they're intrigued by it. And I think it also helps that I am one of them. I am a digital nomad and so are they. And that kind of helps us have that first conversation. So yeah, it won't work with every product, but that's another really good growth tip, I think, for early stage growth.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's probably one of the most underrated one. Tapping into other audiences is just a gold mine of traffic that you can drive to your product or service or newsletter. I did the same in my newsletter. First thing that I did, I invested in a huge one that has my audience. And I got like almost 2,000 clicks on that ad. Of course, was a huge subscribers, around 90,000 or something like that. And I got 400 or 500 subscribers in literally 2 or 3 days. And I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. I don't have a straightaway plan with it. I didn't move forward and invest in other sponsorship deals like that. But yeah, definitely either sponsorship or like cross promoting with others. It's amazing.
That's a huge hack. And I think the other thing to like tap into there, if you're having those conversations, it feels like you're not being authentic or it's not fair for the person on the other side of the table. Just remind them that like once they were sat where you were sat. Like this, like almost like an opportunity for them to give back a little bit and be like, you've built this amazing thing. I think that's amazing. I'd love it if you help me out, and I'll share you 10 times if you just share me once. Like show that you're willing, and people often they receive that kind of behavior and that attitude. Like they receive that very well.
Yeah, I love that. And speaking of future ways of growing it, you mentioned referrals. What other plans do you have? Or you just have one approach, validate that, test it, and then you come up with the next one?
Yeah, so I'm a lean team right now. So it's me and I have some part-time help with social media. And then I'm actually looking at the moment to hire an assistant to help with some stuff because there's just so much stuff to do. But so far, it's been really difficult for me to kind of chase multiple experiments. So we're going to launch the referral program and we're going to see how that goes. I think all of this kind of statistics and the research on this, because you can go like really deep into the psychology of a referral program. And there's many like newsletter case studies which you can tap into to learn from. So I think it's going to go well. But let's see. If it doesn't, then we have to figure something else out. Even if it doesn't do what I want it to do, because I have like an idea in mind of what I think is possible. Even if it doesn't do that, it's not going to do badly. I'm never going to do less new subscribers because of this. So it's always going to be like a net positive. But yeah, and it's the kind of thing where it can just be on automatic, right? Like once it's set up, it can run by itself. So it's never going to be like detrimental. It's always going to be good. But after that, then I'll have to start considering other growth strategies. And to be honest, maybe at that point, I'll look at paid. There's already some very early stage stuff happening with paid, but it's not like live yet. But I think that will probably be the next step because I have enough subscribers now to really know who to target. Yeah, I think that'll probably be the way that it goes.
And speaking of financials, running a solo business, you need to hire help. Even if you're a solopreneur, at least myself, I'm the principle that I want to hire part-time contractors as you do and just getting help with the things I'm not best at or those that are just helping me leverage my time better to run the business, not work inside it. And how all this works for you, or how do you plan to invest, as you mentioned, probably in a sponsorship approach or to hire a specific person before actually jumping into it? How do you balance that revenue streams with the expenses and so on?
Honestly, for me, like when I started, I was working my day job, and before I decided to go all in on this business, it was the pandemic. So I was earning full time, I had a full time salary, and nobody was really doing anything in the pandemic. So spending was very low, and I just built as much savings as I could. And I was like, okay, this is now going to be the money that I use to live with while I continue building the business. And then that kind of worked for a while. And then now I was starting to find, or like recently, maybe in the last 6 months, I was like, okay, there needs to be more, right? Like there needs to be more growth for this to be where I want it to be. I wasn't happy with where it was financially. And many people, like many like friends who run businesses, even friends who don't run businesses are like, hey, just hire somebody because it sounds easy, right? It sounds easy to say that. If you don't run a business, your friend is like, yeah, just, isn't that how people do it? Right? Like it's easier to say it from the outside than it is to do it. And in the past, I've tried to outsource things, very kind of project based things, single tasks, and it's not gone very well for me. Kind of got burned a few times from different freelancers and stuff, which just didn't give me the best reason to do it again or to do it on a more long term. And then somebody said something to me and it stuck. And the thing that they said to me was like, if you gave up your job to build this business, what difference does it make if you just go one step further and have a part-time hire? Like it would be stupid to not hire somebody to help you continue building the business after you gave up your job. And that really helped me put it into perspective. And yeah, and now I'm hiring. So that person, thankfully, is somebody that understands recruitment really well and helped me with some of the processes and stuff. But yeah, I think that was a really key realization for me. Like I knew I was in my own way. Like you said it yourself, right? Like you don't want to work in the business. You want to work on the business. And I am in my own way, blocking myself from working on the business because I'm so distracted. It's not even really a distraction. It's a necessity to work in the business right now. I have to work in the business. And so hiring was really about understanding that if I ever want to work on the business, somebody else has to work in the business.
That's really important because at the end of the day, the financial starts from there. As soon as you realize this thing, and the fact that, of course, a lot of people will try to give you advice, especially friends and family, that you should do that and that. And at the end of the day, you're the only one that actually knows when is the right moment to maybe invest in hiring someone, or when is the best moment to make a purchase. And it's a full-time job, but not the full-time job that people think it is. It's more than that. We often spend probably more time on it than we're going to spend on a full-time job. That's a huge lesson there. And apart from that, what other things you wish you knew when you started?
This is such a good question. I think one of the things that I wish I knew before I started would be how much of a roller coaster it is when you hear people talk about it. Like even when I had a job, I'd listen to people who ran their own businesses and they would just talk through this journey. And they're like, oh, there's so many ups and downs, or like the highs are really high and the lows are really low, stuff like that. And it's like really almost cliched. But honestly, like I really didn't anticipate like how much of a roller coaster it is. And even if you can, I think the thing that I wish I knew or I wish I could do better if I could go back is like to have perspective on that so that when I am really low, like now, because it happens so many times, you have these highs and then these lows. Now, when I'm in a low place, I'm like, okay, this isn't going to be forever. Like this is just one of those low points. And I just need to remember, it's like if you look at a stock chart over 1 week, it looks like it goes up and down like crazy. If you zoom out for the 10-year view, it's like it's gone up. It's probably gone up a lot over the 10 years. So I think if I could go back, I would tell myself just to have more perspective. When I feel crap or if I feel like it's a really down moment, then yeah, I would tell myself to have more perspective on those particular moments. And the flip side is to also have perspective even when things are on the high moments, because after all of the high moments, things come down a little bit. You can't keep going forever. So that's always useful to remember too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons in business, that if you stay consistent and if you put the work for a long time, eventually the growth will happen. And yeah, those slow moments are just passive things that happens to anyone. And even if you have a full-time job or if you run your own business, they will still be there. And yeah, that's really important to remember. And do you tap into different type of maybe knowledge base or resources in order to stay on top of things, or you get inspired to new ideas of growing your business, running your business? Anything to share on that topic?
I think I keep on top of the mindset stuff with this notes file in my phone. And sometimes you just hear something. It's like when you hear somebody says something or you read something or in a podcast, right? Or it's in a news article or a book and it just hits, like really understand it. And it's about something to do with the mindset or the approach, something like that. So I take all of those and I write them all down in a notes file in my phone. So I have a bunch of these. It's maybe like, I don't know how long it is, but I write them all down. And sometimes, especially if I'm in those low moments, I pull that file out. Like in the morning, I don't really like to go from bed to a screen. So I like to have definitely time outside if possible. And if not outside, then just moving physically, so like some workout or something. But if I'm in a really downtime, I'll go to this notes file and I'll just read them, and it makes me feel great. Makes me remember there's a down moment, or it makes me remember the moment when I heard it for the first time and everything else that I learned about that thing. So if I'm reading a whole book and there's 2 or 3 things that stick out and I copy them, reading them back makes me remember the whole book and the lessons from the book. Or maybe it's like somebody really influential and they're on a podcast and they say something and it sticks. It takes me back to that whole conversation that they had on the podcast. So this is good for me. I don't think it helps take me forward. Like, it doesn't help me learn new things, but I think just remembering the things that I have learned. Because when you're in chaos, like when you think that you're having like the worst day ever or the worst week ever or the worst month ever, being able to remember everything that you learned, that's as good as learning something new to move you forward. And it keeps the baseline slowly building. So I think I would say that for like mindset stuff.
Yeah, and of course, we learn all of our lives. I really love what you do about that, and it just gave me an idea. I just record myself some audio notes that automatically transcribe, but I love to actually review them like you do, because I just keep them there. I never go through them, and that's of course pointless. And yeah, thanks for that reminder.
Yeah, I would add like there's one other thing that I do, and I just realized that I did it, which is looking at the stuff that you learned or those moments that like those sites or those quotes, right? From stuff that you learn from. They're really good for when you're in a downtime. But there's also something you can do to like leverage the good times. Like when I hit 1,000 subscribers, I have like a Google Drive file where I just like wrote down 100 words or 200 words. It's not a lot. It's just like what I was doing, where I was, who I was with, how I felt, and what it meant to me to get to 1,000. And that's just in my Google Drive. And like there are times when I will read that and it hits differently because it's not somebody else. It's not like some external quote. That's like going back in history, going back in time to that moment and how I felt in that time. And that's really good. So I think another thing that you can do is like when you're in those really high moments, try to just capture as much of it as possible. It's really easy to do that for social media, but I would say like do it in a private space, like in a notebook or on Google Drive or somewhere that's just completely offline, like even if it's online, off other people's line, like just for you. And then you could tap back into that. And I think that's always a nice boost when you do that.
Absolutely. And it's so important to celebrate those wins, because at the end of the day, it's your win and you have to celebrate it with some words like you mentioned, or to have like a ritual in which you probably just plan at every 1,000 subscribers to do something nice or whatever. But these small wins, it's a reminder that we do something for ourselves and we do something that we love. And that's important because often we are trapped into this treadmill of life in which every time something happens, life throws us things, and good or bad doesn't matter. But if we keep on going back to what our purpose, what we want to achieve with that, where we want to arrive, then we realize that, oh, I'm on the right path. I want and I do the things that matters for me. And yeah, that's it's an important reminder. And I want to get back a bit to your business model, because I know that you also have a premium side of newsletter. At what stage do you incorporate that, and what's the difference between the two? And I know as well that you have a special discount link to it for our listeners.
Yeah, I think you're right with any kind of win to celebrate it, especially if it's not like you have this big team to celebrate with. So like have a ritual for yourself. That's a great tip. I'm going to do more of that. As for the premium, yeah, so we have a premium version of the newsletter. And I would suggest like only do this if you are really clear on what the commitment is up front, and try to have a good an understanding as you possibly can about your conversion rates and free paid, because the worst thing you could do is like you have maybe a lower than you expect percentage converts to the paid version, but you still have that commitment to them to deliver that content. So like I talked about this a lot with different people, and some people say like, oh, it was a terrible idea, I did it too early. They had like premium versions of stuff and like they launched it too early, so 5 people sign up, but then they have to do all of that extra work for not a great amount of money. So it ends up not being worth it until they gain the momentum. So yeah, I would say like if you know going in that you can do it with a level of effort that you're comfortable with, then it's great. If you think like, okay, I'm going to launch it and then I'm going to keep building different features or I'm going to keep adding stuff, I would advise people to like really sit down and figure out like what realistically is the conversion rate going to be. And you could even ask people, if you have a newsletter audience, you can do it with just a click poll. Or if you have some kind of other online community, like you can engage with them and ask them like, hey, would you buy this? And if a lot of people will say yes, even if they wouldn't buy it. So then you have to ask them for some card details, and then you get it to the point where you're really clear on what the effort will be for the return. I think I have an okay balance right now. Like I'm happy with the work that goes into the paid premium model, but it's not optimal. It's definitely not optimal. Like the absent with the paid version is you're doing the same amount of work as you're going to do to deliver this service to 10 people as you are to 1,000 people. So once you get to like 100 people, it's amazing. Everything above is like a total win. That's what I would say about the premium stuff. Just try to have as good an understanding as possible, because I think it's very easy to get attracted by this shiny premium model. Whereas I think maybe, if you put the same amount of effort into just growing and growth and like trying to attract sponsors for the newsletter, maybe it would be a different story financially. So yeah, you can always launch premium later. If you run the numbers and it doesn't look good, don't be upset. You can just launch it in another 3 months or another 6 months and just keep focusing on the growth, because the whole business failed without the top of the funnel. So
Yeah, that's the thing. If you don't validate the idea and you just jump headfirst and you implement something that people might not want, you end up, as you mentioned, doing all the work for basically nothing. And I want to ask you, what's the difference between the free version of the newsletter and the premium one?
the free RemoteBase newsletter is sent twice a month, and it has a range of properties from all around the world, different sizes. So like studio apartments all the way to like villas and stuff. And yeah, all around the world, different budgets as well. So every like under $1,000, under $800, all the way up to like $2,000 for a month for a place, which is still a very good price for like a 3-bedroom spot somewhere. But people's budgets are elastic, so you've got to have something for everybody in that free version. The paid version is a little bit different. With the paid version, you sign up and you say, hey, I'm Gabe. I want to see 2-bedroom apartments in Latin America. I don't want to spend more than $1,000 and I want to be at the beach. And then we just send you everything that we find that matches these criteria. You can do more than just that. You can say that you're interested in Latin America and Southeast Asia. You can kind of say like, I want to see everything in Europe or Southeast Asia or Europe and Latin America. You can kind of piece it together how you want. So the preferences are really for you to set. And then we just send you all of the best stuff, and we send it to you as we find it. So you don't have to like wait for the free newsletter. It's just a constant flow of maybe every couple of days. We don't want to spam you, but yeah. And also on the premium membership, you can also now access our like deal directory. So every single deal that we've ever sent in the past is listed in a like filterable Airtable, and you get a link to that. So of course, this comes with like this huge caveat of like a deal that was sent out 2 years ago. Like it's probably not going to be the same price as it was then. They might not even be available. The premise of this is that you can, if you want, go and find these properties and you can message the host and have a conversation about a discount. I actually didn't want to launch this feature, but everybody who was on the paid plan was like, yeah, I want it. Give it to me. So we did it and they loved it. So yeah, sometimes you have to give people what they want.
Absolutely. And yeah, that's the thing. Like once a place was at some point at a discount or a huge deal, the chances for you to be able to negotiate a good price with that owner, it's very high. And what I love about the premium part of your newsletter is the fact that you solve a huge problem. Just chasing accommodations, it's a huge dent in your time. I experience every single time you have to move. We spend probably days chasing those deals, and I don't want to divulge all your secrets, but if you can give us some tips on how do you find these deals?
It's honestly a lot of hard work and a little bit of magic. So it's like 95% of what we send. They make it very difficult to automate anything. So a lot of that is hard work. We automate as much of it as we can without like breaking terms of service. And I personally vet everything that goes out. So, like I said at the start about being like a trusted voice and being independent about this, I really do look at everything and make sure like this would be a good place or this wouldn't be a good place. And I can kind of say that because I live this life. And I think that goes a long way in helping quality control everything. The other 5% of stuff, all of the stuff that's not on Airbnb, most of the time that comes down to personal network and like, all of that good content that's going out on LinkedIn and the network there, and networking with different co-living spaces if I'm in a location, or being at an event and talking about Nomad Accommodation and people want to chat to me about what they're doing. That kind of stuff is where we find all of the like the non-Airbnb stuff. There's a real mix, and yeah, there's a lot of hard work that goes into it and just magic where we can.
That's why I mentioned it's so time consuming, because it's a lot of work, like to search and find those deals, negotiate them, try to see if the accommodation has a good internet connection or that amenity or whatever. It's not easy to find one. And so happy to see someone that is solving this problem for nomads and remote workers, because it's such a huge and important aspect. At the end of the day, if you have the chance to go to co-working space or something, to have a nice and good place to work from, live in, it's so important and make you feel home. So That's an underrated aspect of this lifestyle. I'll put for those listening the link to the RemoteBase newsletter in the show notes. And apart from that, how can people connect with you in order to partner with you or just share ideas, opinions?
I would love for people want to talk about newsletters or Nomad Life or share an opinion with me, then definitely do that. The most kind of direct way to get hold of me is to sign up to the newsletter and then respond to one of the emails that you send out. That's probably the thing that gets my attention as the top priority. Outside of that, I am available on LinkedIn a lot of the time. So you can just look for Chris Cerra on LinkedIn, or I'm on Instagram also at Nomad Accommodation Guy. I'll give you all of the links for those. And yeah, email, LinkedIn, Instagram, I'm here and I'm always happy to talk about this stuff. So please do come and let me know that you heard about me here on the show with Gabe and let's talk.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And to wrap things up, I would love you to create a short challenge for those listening, something they can apply in less than 24 hours in order to launch their own newsletter.
I will give you my Beehive affiliate link to put in the show notes. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, like go and sign up. Like if you don't already have the account, get the account. Don't think about the domain name yet. Don't think about the branding yet. Just like go and get the account. Because once you have the account, you get the little box. So whether it's your personal branding website or it's your LinkedIn page or your Instagram bio, you can get the link there. And it all starts with just collecting the email addresses. So many times I speak to people, it's like, yeah, I have 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, but like, I want to do a newsletter and I want to do it in the future. I'm like, well, have you got an account? They're like, no. Get an account. First thing you need to do. Everything else is like after that. So that would be my top tip. You can do it in 24 hours. You can do it in 10 minutes. You just need an email address and a password and you can create your account. Go and do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that challenge and for everything that you shared today. Love your business model. And I personally wrote down a lot of notes. Oh my, I can apply so many in my own business. So thank you so much, Chris, for joining us today and for sharing all your tips.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Thanks for listening, everybody. If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure to subscribe to your favorite podcast station to not miss when we drop the next one. We have lots of exciting guests and surprises for you coming up. This is your host, Gabe Marushka, with the Nomad Solopreneur Show. Until next week, pura vida!